Welcome. Tonight we begin with something a little different. A time of faded neon, forgotten highways, and pie cooling on the windowsill. We're diving into what life was really like in the heart of Americana. Forget the Hollywood glitz and glamour. The truth, you probably wouldn't last a single day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the country. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The old town of Havenwood nestled itself into a gentle fold of the landscape, much like a contented cat curling up in a sunbeam. Its main street, a ribbon of weathered asphalt that had seen more parades than problems, more leisurely Sunday drives than frantic dashes to anywhere particularly urgent. And as the sun, a molten gold coin, began its slow descent behind the onyx hills that cupped the western edge of the valley, the streetlights. Those faithful sentinels with their softly buzzing crowns of light began to flicker on, one by one, casting pools of amber onto the sidewalks where the occasional stray dandelion, a tiny sun itself, pushed bravely through a crack in the concrete, a testament to nature's quiet persistence in a world that was otherwise slowing down for the evening. The air itself seeming to thicken with the scent of honeysuckle drifting from Mrs. Albright's sprawling bushes down by the creek, and the fainter, more distant aroma of freshly mown hay from Farmer McGregor's fields that lay just beyond the last row of clapboard houses, painted in hues of faded blue and lemon yellow. Their porches adorned with rocking chairs that swayed almost imperceptibly in the evening breeze, sometimes occupied by silhouettes content to watch the day end, sometimes empty, holding the memory of conversations past. The creak of their would a familiar lullaby to the town, and down at the end of Main, where the road forked, one path leading out towards the interstate that hummed like a giant, sleeping beast in the far distance, and the other snaking its way deeper into the wooded hollows, stood the Starlight Diner, its neon sign, a winking star with a swooping comet tail, casting a warm, inviting glow that promised coffee, strong and hot, and pie always pie, with crusts so flaky they whispered secrets to your fork. And inside, Flo, her hair a magnificent silver bouffant that defied gravity and fashion, was wiping down the Formica countertop, its surface a galaxy of tiny, embedded sparkles. Her movements practiced and economical, honed by decades of serving up comfort and conversation in equal measure. The clatter of her ceramic mug against the saucer, a percussive beat in the diner's quiet symphony, which also included the gentle hiss of the coffee machine, the low murmur of the baseball game playing on the transistor radio tucked behind the pie case, a game that seemed to exist in a perpetual seventh-inning stretch. The announcer's voice a soothing drone that never quite reached a fever pitch of excitement, but rather maintained a steady, reassuring cadence, much like the town itself, and through the diner's big plate glass window, which reflected the streetlights like captured stars, one could see old Mr. Abernathy taking his evening constitutional, his gait slow but steady, his fedora tilted just so, a familiar landmark in the human geography of Havenwood, pausing occasionally to tap his cane against a loose paving stone or to nod at a passing car, usually one of those sturdy, reliable sedans from a decade or two prior, their chrome gleaming softly under the artificial light, their engines a low thrum that spoke of dependability rather than speed. Cars that had probably been bought new from Henderson's Automotive, which now stood mostly quiet, its showroom windows dusty, showcasing a single, pristine, cherry-red coupe from an era when fins were fashionable and gasoline was cheap. A silent monument to a time when the open road felt wider, more full of promise. Before the interstate rerouted dreams and commerce, leaving towns like Havenwood to settle into a comfortable, unhurried rhythm. Like a river finding its old, familiar course after a temporary diversion. And the dust motes danced in the golden shafts of light slanting through the diner window. Each one a tiny world, swirling in the currents of warm air rising from the griddle that had long since been shut down for the night, but still radiated a gentle warmth, a memory of bacon and eggs, of pancakes stacked high, of countless breakfasts served to locals, and the occasional weary traveler who'd taken the scenic route by mistake, or perhaps by a stroke of quiet luck, and found themselves in a place where time seemed to stretch and breathe, where the ticking of the large, round clock above the kitchen pass-through, its hands sweeping with a ponderous grace, was more a suggestion than a command, a gentle reminder of the day's progression rather than a relentless driving force. And Mildred Macmillan, who lived in the little yellow house with the white picket fence just off Sycamore Street, was watering her prize-winning petunias, their velvety trumpets a riot of purple and pink in the twilight, the water from her old green watering can making a soft, whispering sound as it met the thirsty earth, the scent of damp soil mingling with the perfume of the flowers, a quintessential summer evening fragrance that wrapped around the senses like a soft, woolen blanket. And she hummed a tune, something from a half-forgotten musical, a melody that surfaced unbidden from the deep well of her memories, a tune her late husband, Tom, used to whistle while he worked in his woodshop out back, the scent of sawdust and varnish forever linked in her mind with his quiet presence. His calloused hands, the way his eyes would crinkle at the corners when he smiled, which was often, especially when he was presenting her with some newly crafted birdhouse or a refinished rocking chair, objects imbued with love and patience. Much like the town itself, built slowly, cared for diligently, meant to last, not to be flashy. And as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a sky bruised with purple and streaks of apricot, the first fireflies began to appear in the deepening shadows of her garden, tiny, blinking lanterns, signaling the true arrival of night, their intermittent sparks mirroring the distant stars that were just beginning to prick through the velvet expanse above, a celestial counterpart to the earthbound glow of the Starlight Diner's sign and the streetlights lining Main Street. And the gentle rhythm of the crickets started up, a soft, undulating chorus that would provide the soundtrack for the night, joined occasionally by the deeper croak of a bullfrog from the direction of Miller's Pond, a place where children sailed makeshift boats in the summer and ice skated in the winter, its surface reflecting the changing seasons like a patient, ancient mirror, and the evening train, the 8:15 freight, could be heard in the distance, its mournful horn echoing through the valley, a sound that wasn't jarring or disruptive, but rather reassuring, a reminder of the world outside, of connections to other places, other lives. Yet it also underscored the comfortable isolation of Havenwood, its self-contained peacefulness. The whistle a long, drawn-out sigh that seemed to say, "All is well, sleep now." As it rumbled along the tracks that ran parallel to the old highway, tracks that were now more rust than silver in places, but still serviceable, still carrying goods to and fro. A lifeline, however tenuous, to the bustling world beyond the Onyx Hills, and inside the homes along Elm Street and Oak Avenue, lights were on in kitchens and living rooms, squares of yellow warmth against the encroaching darkness, families finishing supper. The clink of cutlery, the murmur of voices discussing the day's small events, a good grade on a spelling test, a bargain found at the general store, a funny thing the neighbor's dog did, the mundane, essential fabric of life, woven thread by thread, day by day, and sometimes, if you listened carefully, you could hear the faint sound of a piano being played, perhaps young Emily Peterson practicing her scales, the notes drifting out through an open window, a little hesitant, a little unsure, but full of a quiet determination. Or maybe it was old Mrs. Henderson, her fingers, though gnarled with arthritis, still finding the familiar chords of a hymn or a sentimental ballad from her youth, the music a fragile, lovely thing in the still night air, a thread of melody connecting generations, and the screen door of the Carmichael house, just across from the park with its ancient, tire-swing-adorned oak tree, creaked open and shut with a familiar twang as young Timmy Carmichael dashed out, a mason jar in hand, hoping to catch a few of those magical fireflies before his mother called him in for bed, his bare feet thudding softly on the porch steps and then padding almost silently on the cool grass, his laughter a bright, fleeting sound that mingled with the chirp of the crickets, a sound as natural to a Havenwood evening as the rustle of leaves in the poplar trees that lined the park, their leaves shimmering like silver coins in the faint breeze that had picked up, carrying with it the scent of distant rain, a promise of coolness after a warm day, and Sheriff Brody, a man whose considerable bulk was matched only by his gentle nature, was making his rounds, his patrol car, a slightly battered but impeccably clean Ford Crown Victoria, cruising slowly down Main Street, his window down, his elbow resting on the sill, nodding to anyone he saw. His presence a comforting reassurance rather than a symbol of authority, in a town where the most serious crime in recent memory was when someone's prize-winning pumpkin disappeared the night before the county fair. An incident that was still spoken of in hushed, slightly amused tones at the diner, and he paused for a moment by the war memorial in the town square, a simple granite obelisk engraved with names that were becoming faded with time, but not with memory. The small, neatly tended flower bed at its base glowing softly in the light from the nearby street lamp, a quiet place for reflection, a place that held the town's collective sorrow and its pride, a silent reminder of sacrifices made in far-off lands by boys who had once played baseball in the very same park, whose laughter had once echoed down these same streets. And the air grew cooler, the breeze more insistent, carrying the earthy smell of approaching rain more strongly now, and the leaves on the maple trees that arched over Maple Lane began to whisper more urgently, their undersides flashing pale in the dim light, a signal that nature was preparing for a change. And inside the Starlight Diner, Flo was pouring herself a final cup of coffee, the baseball game on the radio now over, replaced by a late-night program of soothing, sentimental music, the kind with sweeping strings and crooning vocals, music that seemed designed to accompany quiet thoughts and the slow winding down of the day. And she looked out the window at the empty street, the occasional car passing by, its headlights sweeping across the interior of the diner, momentarily illuminating the chrome napkin dispensers and the sugar shakers with their gleaming silver tops. And she thought about the morning, about the deliveries that would arrive, the fresh bread, the milk, the eggs, the daily ritual of replenishing, of preparing for another day of serving, of listening, of being a small, steady anchor in the lives of the people of Havenwood, a role she cherished, though she rarely spoke of it, her satisfaction found in the perfectly brewed pot of coffee, the evenly golden pancake, the contented sigh of a customer who had found a moment of peace at her counter. and the first drops of rain began to fall, fat, splattering drops that made dark circles on the pavement, the sound a soft drumming on the diner roof, a comforting, rhythmic patter that seemed to wash away the last vestiges of the day's heat and hurry. And Mr. Henderson, who owned the now-quiet automotive dealership, was sitting on his wide front porch on Chestnut Avenue, a glass of iced tea, sweating in his hand, watching the rain begin in earnest, the streetlights reflecting in the wet asphalt, turning the road into a shimmering, dark river. And he thought about the cars he had sold over the years, the families they had carried, the journeys they had taken, each one a story, a chapter in the life of the town, from the sturdy post-war sedans to the flashy muscle cars of the 60s, to the more practical, boxy vehicles of later years, each reflecting the spirit of its time. And he remembered the excitement of a new model year, the shiny brochures, the smell of new upholstery, the satisfaction of handing over the keys to a proud new owner. Those days felt distant now, like a scene from an old, faded photograph. But the memories were warm, comforting, like the old chenille blanket his wife kept on the porch swing. And the rain intensified, a steady, soaking shower now, blurring the edges of everything. The world outside the porch transformed into a soft-focus watercolor painting. The sounds of the town muffled, softened, the distant train whistle when it came again, sounding even more mournful, more remote, as if calling from another, dreamier world, and the only sharp sounds were the drip from the eaves and the gurgle of the downspout as it channeled the water away from the house. And inside houses all over Havenwood, people were turning off their televisions, finishing their books, saying their good nights, the rituals of bedtime unfolding in 1,000 quiet ways, teeth brushed, prayers said. Windows cracked open to let in the cool, rain-scented air, the sound of the rain a universal lullaby, a promise of renewal, of fresh beginnings when the morning came, and even the old town clock in the steeple of the First Presbyterian Church, its face dimly illuminated, seemed to tick a little slower, its chimes, when they marked the hour, softer, more resonant in the damp air, as if respecting the town's descent into slumber. And at the Starlight Diner, Flo finally locked the door, the open sign flipped to closed, its neon glow extinguished for the night, leaving only the small security light burning over the cash register. And she walked slowly to her small apartment above the diner, her footsteps echoing slightly in the empty stairwell. The scent of old wood and lingering cooking smells a familiar comfort. And once inside, she'd make herself a cup of chamomile tea, sit by her window and watch the rain, perhaps read a few pages from a well-worn novel, its cover softened by many readings, its story as familiar and comforting as an old friend. And the town of Havenwood slept, or began to, under the cleansing, steady rain, the streetlights casting lonely halos on the wet streets. The only movement the sway of trees in the wind and the occasional passage of a late-night truck on the distant, almost forgotten highway, its tires hissing on the wet pavement, a sound that blended seamlessly with the rhythm of the rain, and the old, faded billboards along that highway, advertising products no longer made or services long since discontinued. Try Glutz beer. Or next stop, Eats Eats Best Chili Dogs this side of the Mississippi, stood as silent, dripping sentinels of a past that lingered like a gentle ghost, their colors muted by time and weather, their messages a poignant reminder of the relentless, yet often unnoticed, march of time. A march that in Havenwood seemed to take a more leisurely, ambling pace, allowing for reflection, for the savoring of small moments, for the slow accumulation of memories that formed the rich, unseen soil from which the town drew its quiet strength and its enduring character. And the rain was a curtain, soft and gray, drawn across the sleeping town, muffling the world, creating an insular, cozy space where dreams could unfold undisturbed. Dreams of summer picnics by the creek, of catching fireflies in a jar, of slow dances under a string of colored lights at a long-ago town festival, of the smell of popcorn and cotton candy, of the thrill of the Ferris wheel lifting you high above the town, offering a brief, magical glimpse of the world laid out like a toy set below. These were the kinds of dreams that flourished in Havenwood, gentle, nostalgic, rooted in the simple, enduring pleasures of a life lived at a human pace. And as the night deepened, the rain gradually softened, its rhythm becoming a mere whisper, a gentle shushing sound, as if the sky itself were lulling the town to sleep, and the moon, a pale disk behind a thin veil of clouds, cast a diffused, silvery light over the wet rooftops and glistening leaves, transforming the familiar landscape into something ethereal, almost magical, a scene from a half-remembered fairy tale. And the only sound that truly punctuated the quiet was the occasional sigh of the wind in the eaves of the old houses, or the distant, almost imperceptible rumble of thunder from a storm cell that had passed far to the east. Its energy spent, leaving behind only this cool, clean air and the scent of wet earth, and the old wooden bridge that spanned Willow Creek at the edge of town. Its timbers, darkened by countless rains, creaked softly as it settled, a sound that only the most attentive listener would notice, a sound that spoke of age and resilience, of enduring presence, much like the ancient willow trees that trailed their fronds in the gently flowing water below, their leaves dripping silver in the moonlight. And inside the general store on Main Street, owned by the Henderson family for 3 generations, the shadows were long and deep. The rows of shelves laden with goods, from penny candy in glass jars to sturdy work gloves, from bolts of calico fabric to cans of motor oil, a silent testament to the varied needs and desires of the townsfolk, each item holding the potential for a small story, a purpose, a moment in someone's day, and the old-fashioned brass cash register, its keys worn smooth by countless transactions, gleamed faintly in the sliver of moonlight that found its way through the front window, past the hand-lettered signs advertising weekly specials, signs written in Mr. Henderson S.R.'s distinctive, slightly shaky cursive, a script as familiar to the town as his own kind, weathered face, and the air inside the store held a unique, comforting smell, a blend of coffee beans from the grinder near the back, sweet tobacco from the pipe mixture old man Fitzwilliam always bought, leather from the new work boots, and the faint, dusty scent of paper from the stacks of newspapers and magazines, a smell that was uniquely Havenwood, a smell that could transport anyone who had grown up there right back to their childhood, to Saturday mornings spent choosing candy or flipping through comic books while their parents chatted with neighbors, the store a hub, a gathering place, a repository of news and gossip, all conducted at a pace that allowed for genuine connection, not just commerce. And the big, sleepy tabby cat named Chester, the unofficial mayor of the general store, was curled up on a pile of burlap sacks near the warmth of the old, pot-bellied stove, which even in summer seemed to radiate a phantom heat, its surface cool to the touch, but its presence a reminder of cozy winter days, of snow piling up outside and the stove glowing cherry red, a beacon of warmth and community. And Chester twitched his whiskers in his sleep, perhaps dreaming of chasing spectral mice through the aisles, or of receiving a surreptitious scratch behind the ears from a favored customer. His soft, rumbling purr too low to be heard by human ears, but a vibration of pure contentment in the quiet heart of the sleeping store. And out on the porches, the rocking chairs, now damp with mist, swayed almost imperceptibly, as if moved by the gentle breathing of the houses themselves, the houses that held the dreams and memories of generations, their foundations sunk deep into the familiar earth of Havenwood, their windows like eyes, closed now in slumber, reflecting the soft, diffused moonlight, and the town, wrapped in the cool embrace of the post-rain night, seemed to sigh collectively, a gentle exhalation of peace and continuity, a sense that despite the turning of the world, some things, some places, some ways of being could endure not through resistance to change, but through a quiet adaptation, a gentle persistence, like the river finding its way, or the dandelion pushing through the concrete, or the faded neon sign of the Starlight Diner promising, with its steadfast glow, that morning would come, and with it another day in Havenwood, a day much like the one before, and much like the one to follow, filled with the small, ordinary, yet deeply meaningful moments that constituted the rhythm of life in this quiet corner of the world, where the hum of a distant train was not a call to leave, but a reminder of how good it was to be home, to be still, to be surrounded by the familiar, the comforting, the enduring tapestry of a life woven with simple threads of kindness, routine, and the gentle passage of time, a time measured not just by the ticking of the old church clock, but by the blooming of the roses in Mrs. Albright's garden, the ripening of apples in McGregor's orchard, the first frost on the pumpkin patch, and the slow, steady turning of the seasons, each with its own quiet beauty, its own familiar rituals, its own contribution to the deep, resonant peace that was the very soul of Havenwood, a peace that settled over the valley like the softest of blankets, tucking everyone in, inviting them to rest, to dream, to be renewed by the deep, quiet magic of an ordinary night in an extraordinary, ordinary place. And as the hours crept towards dawn, the stars, now clear and brilliant in the washed sky, seemed to hang lower, brighter, like diamonds scattered on black velvet, their ancient light traveling unimaginable distances to sparkle for a moment over this small, sleeping town. A silent, cosmic benediction, and the air itself felt clean, new-minted, carrying the faintest promise of the sun, still hours away, but already stirring somewhere beyond the dark horizon. And the only sounds were the truly elemental ones, the whisper of the last drops of water falling from leaves, the occasional hoot of an owl from the deep woods, a creature of the night keeping its lonely vigil, its call a mysterious, fleeting note in the symphony of profound stillness. And the world held its breath, poised on the cusp of another day, another cycle, another gentle unfolding of life in Havenwood, where the greatest adventures were often found in the quiet observation of the everyday, in the shared smile, the helping hand, the comforting presence of neighbors who were more like family, in the enduring beauty of a landscape that had cradled generations, and would, with any luck, cradle many more, its gentle hills and winding creeks, its shady groves and sun-drenched fields, all part of the enduring charm, the deep, quiet magic of this place, a place where the past was not a burden but a soft, comforting presence, a wellspring of stories and traditions that nourished the present and gave hope for a future as peaceful and steady as the flow of Willow Creek itself, meandering gracefully towards an unseen sea, much like the lives within the town, each following its own course, yet all part of the same gentle, enduring current. The faint aroma of damp earth and awakening blossoms began to mingle with the lingering coolness of the night as the eastern sky, beyond the silhouette of the onyx hills, started to show the faintest blush of pearly gray, a subtle shift from the inky blackness that had held dominion for hours, and in the chicken coop behind McGregor's farmhouse, a rooster, perhaps sensing this imperceptible change, stirred on its perch, its internal clock ticking with an accuracy that predated any man-made timepiece, readying itself for its daily proclamation, a sound that would soon ripple across the dew-kissed fields, a clarion call heralding the slow, inevitable return of light. And inside the homes, the deep sleep of the inhabitants was beginning to lighten, transitioning into that hazy, liminal state between dream and wakefulness, where thoughts drifted like dandelion fluff on a summer breeze, unanchored, ephemeral, and the old grandfather clock in the hallway of the Abernathy house, its brass pendulum swinging with a hypnotic, metronomic rhythm. Prepared to strike the pre-dawn hour, its chimes, when they came, would be sonorous and dignified, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to carry the weight of accumulated years, each tick a tiny grain of sand falling through the hourglass of Havenwood's existence, and the streetlights, those steadfast companions of the night, still cast their amber glow, but their light now seemed a little less potent, a little more fragile against the slowly brightening canvas of the sky, their purpose gradually yielding to the greater, more ancient power of the sun. And the milkman, young Billy Henderson, grandson of the automotive Henderson, though his chosen vehicle was a battered but reliable panel truck, was already up, his own internal alarm set by habit and responsibility. The clink of glass bottles in their metal crates a familiar pre-dawn sound in the quiet solitude of his small dairy. A sound that promised fresh milk on porches before most of the town had even thought about stirring. A small, daily act of service that connected him to the rhythm of Havenwood in a way that was both practical and deeply satisfying. His route taking him down every sleeping street, past every darkened window, a silent observer of the town in its most vulnerable, unguarded state. And he knew the habits of each household, who took cream, who preferred skim, who left a note with a special request. These small details painting a mosaic of the community he served, a community that still valued such personal touches, such echoes of a simpler, more interconnected way of life, and the Starlight Diner, though dark and silent on the outside, held within its walls the lingering scent of yesterday's coffee and grilled onions, a phantom aroma that awaited the arrival of Flo, who would soon transform the quiet space back into a bustling haven of warmth and sustenance, her own routine as ingrained as the sunrise, the turning of the key in the lock, the flick of the lights, the first sizzle on the griddle. These were the opening notes of her daily symphony, a performance honed over decades, and the paperboy, Mikey Callahan, not much older than Timmy Carmichael, who had been chasing fireflies just hours before, was folding his newspapers with practiced efficiency on the porch of the general store, the freshly printed ink staining his fingertips, the headlines speaking of a world far removed from Havenwood's immediate concerns, yet a world that was, nonetheless connected by invisible threads of commerce, politics, and shared humanity. And his bicycle, leaning against the store's clapboard wall, its basket already half full, was a trusty steed, ready to carry him on his morning rounds. Each thwack of a paper landing on a porch a small punctuation mark in the awakening day, a signal that information, however distant, was arriving, and the birds, first a tentative chirp, then another, and then a chorus, began their morning songs, a joyful, unrestrained outpouring of sound that seemed to celebrate the mere fact of a new day, their melodies weaving through the branches of the ancient trees, filtering down into the sleepy streets. A natural alarm clock more pleasant than any mechanical device. And the first, true, golden rays of sunlight finally crested the onyx hills, spilling into the valley like liquid honey, chasing away the last lingering shadows, painting the dew-covered grass with millions of tiny, glittering diamonds, and the weathered paint on the old barns seemed to glow with a renewed warmth, their reds and whites suddenly vibrant, their faded lettering advertising long-gone brands of feed or tobacco suddenly legible again in the clear morning light. And Mr. Abernathy, always an early riser, was already on his porch, a steaming mug of coffee in his hand, watching the spectacle of the sunrise, a daily ritual that never lost its quiet majesty for him, each sunrise a fresh promise, a clean slate, a reminder of the beauty and resilience of the world, and he took a slow sip of his coffee, the warmth spreading through him, a small, simple pleasure that set the tone for his day, a day that would likely unfold with the same gentle, predictable rhythm as countless others before it. And that predictability was not a source of boredom, but of comfort, of stability in a world that often felt too chaotic, too fast-paced. And the scent of bacon began to drift from a few kitchens, a savory, irresistible aroma that mingled with the sweet smell of dew and blooming flowers, a quintessential Havenwood morning perfume, and the screen doors began to creak open and snap shut with increasing frequency, their familiar sounds a sign that the town was truly coming alive, shaking off the vestiges of sleep, ready to embrace the unfolding day. And the school bus, a bright yellow behemoth, rumbled to life in its depot near the edge of town, its diesel engine coughing and then settling into a steady thrum, ready for its important task of gathering the town's children, their bright, expectant faces, their chatter and laughter, the future of Havenwood bundled into their backpacks and lunchboxes, and Sheriff Brody, having ended his night shift and enjoyed a hearty breakfast at the Starlight, which Flo had opened with her usual quiet efficiency just as the sun began to truly warm the streets, was now heading home, his own day winding down as the town's was just beginning, a reversal of rhythms that gave him a unique perspective on the community he served, seeing it in both its quiet, sleeping moments and its bustling, waking hours. And he waved to Mrs. Macmillan, who was already tending her petunias again, her sun hat shading her eyes, her movements spry and energetic, a testament to the invigorating power of a good night's sleep and a lifelong passion for gardening. And the flag in the town square, raised each morning by a rotating roster of local veterans, now snapped smartly in the gentle morning breeze, its colors bright against the clear blue sky, a symbol of shared values, of community pride, a focal point around which so much of Havenwood's civic life revolved. From Memorial Day parades to summer band concerts, and the distant hum of the interstate, which had been a mere whisper during the night, now grew slightly more insistent, a reminder of the restless energy of the wider world. But here in Havenwood, that energy was filtered, softened, kept at a comfortable distance, allowing the town to maintain its own unhurried pace, its own distinct flavor, like a well-aged cheese or a slowly simmered stew. Its richness developed over time through patience and care, and the shopkeepers on Main Street began to arrive, unlocking their doors, sweeping their stoops, arranging their window displays. The ritual of opening for business, a daily affirmation of purpose and continuity. Mr. Henderson at the general store, his cat Chester stretching languidly in a patch of sunlight near the door. Mrs. Gable at the pretty as a picture hair salon, her rollers already in place, ready for her first appointment. Young Mr. Davies at the hardware store, his apron already smudged with grease from some early morning repair. Each one a vital cog in the intricate, yet smoothly running machinery of the town's daily life. And the bell above the door of the Starlight Diner jingled merrily as the first wave of breakfast customers arrived. Construction workers ordering hearty platters, office workers grabbing a quick coffee and a donut, retirees settling in for a leisurely meal and a catch-up on the local news, which was often delivered more reliably by word of mouth over Flo's counter than by any printed newspaper. And her coffee pot, perpetually brewing, perpetually full, was the lifeblood of these morning rituals. Its dark, aromatic brew fueling conversations, sparking ideas, or simply providing a moment of quiet contemplation before the demands of the day truly took hold. And the sun climbed higher, its warmth spreading through the streets and alleys, drying the last of the dew from the grass, making the chrome on the old cars parked along Main Street glitter and flash. And the sounds of the town grew, a gentle crescendo of activity, the laughter of children walking to school, the rumble of a delivery truck, the rhythmic clang of a hammer from a nearby construction site where a new porch was being added to an old house. A sign of renewal, of faith in the future, of the enduring appeal of Havenwood's way of life. And the old maple trees, their leaves now a vibrant green in the full sunlight, provided dappled shade on the sidewalks, their branches forming a natural canopy over the comings and goings of the townsfolk, silent, steadfast witnesses to generations of Havenwood life, their roots running as deep as the town's own history. And the day unfolded, not with dramatic events or sudden upheavals, but with the steady, comforting rhythm of ordinary existence. A rhythm that was, in its own quiet way, profoundly beautiful, deeply reassuring. A melody played on the heartstrings of a community that understood the value of simplicity, of connection, of taking the time to notice the small wonders that surrounded them. From the intricate pattern of a spider's web glistening with dew in the morning sun, to the contented sigh of a neighbor resting on their porch in the cool of the evening. These were the moments that made Havenwood, a place where the soul could find rest, where the spirit could be nourished, where the gentle, meandering river of time flowed on, carrying everyone along on its peaceful current, towards horizons unknown, but faced with a quiet confidence born of shared experience, and a deep, abiding sense of belonging. A feeling as warm and comforting as Flo's coffee, as reliable as the sunrise over the Onyx Hills, as enduring as the love that bound families and friends together in this small, cherished corner of the world. A world that, for all its perceived slowness, was rich beyond measure in the things that truly mattered, the things that made a life and a town truly worthwhile. The afternoon sun, now high and generous, bathed Havenwood in a warm, golden light, making the white paint of the picket fences gleam, and the colors of the flowers in Mrs. McMillan's garden seem almost impossibly vibrant. A lazy heat haze shimmered above the asphalt of Main Street, creating mirages in the distance that made the road itself look like a rippling river. And the cicadas, those tireless musicians of summer, had begun their deafening, hypnotic drone from the high branches of the oak and maple trees, a sound so pervasive it became a kind of silence, the auditory backdrop to every summer afternoon in town, a sound that spoke of long, languid days and the sweet, heavy scent of ripening fruit. And inside Henderson's general store, the air was noticeably cooler. The thick stone walls and the slowly rotating ceiling fans providing a welcome respite from the outdoor warmth. And Chester, the cat, had relocated from his morning sunbeam to a shady spot beneath the counter, near the open cracker barrel, his tail twitching occasionally as he dreamt his feline dreams, perhaps of chasing dust bunnies, or of leaping onto the high shelves laden with canned goods and mysterious boxes. And Mr. Henderson himself was behind the counter, sharing a slow, comfortable conversation with Doc Martin, the town's physician for longer than most could remember, a man whose calm demeanor and gentle hands had brought comfort and healing to generations. their voices a low murmur, discussing everything and nothing, the price of corn, the prospects for the local baseball team, the peculiar way the weather had been behaving, the kind of unhurried talk that filled the spaces between more urgent matters, the kind of talk that wove the fabric of community tighter. Thread by familiar thread and out on the sidewalk, a couple of kids, their knees scuffed, their faces flushed from some energetic game, were sharing a bottle of orange soda. Its vivid color a stark contrast to the faded paint of the bench they sat on, their laughter occasionally bubbling up, clear and bright. A sound that seemed to embody the carefree spirit of a Havenwood summer. A time when days stretched out like endless ribbons of possibility, filled with adventures in the woods, explorations along the creek bank, and the simple joy of being young in a place that felt safe and familiar. And the mail truck, driven by Earl, a man whose cheerful whistle preceded him by at least half a block, was making its rounds. Earl exchanging pleasantries with everyone he met, delivering not just letters and packages, but also small snippets of news. A friendly wave, a kind word, his daily route a thread connecting the individual households into the larger tapestry of the town. Each mailbox a small outpost of communication, a receiver of news from afar and messages from just down the street. And at the Starlight Diner, the lunchtime rush had subsided, leaving behind a comfortable lull. Flo was taking a rare moment to sit in one of the booths, a cup of tea in her hand, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the table before her, the radio now playing softer tunes, perhaps some classic country or an old standard from a crooner whose voice was as smooth as caramel. And the pie case was still well stocked, the apple and cherry pies, their crusts golden and crimped, radiating a faint, sweet warmth, a silent promise of afternoon indulgence for anyone who might wander in seeking a treat and a moment of quiet contemplation. And the aroma of coffee, ever present, mingled with the fainter scent of floor cleaner and the lingering ghost of fried bacon, a perfume unique to such establishments, a smell that for many was synonymous with comfort, with a brief escape from the everyday. A place where you could be anonymous or well-known, depending on your preference, and always be sure of a warm welcome and a simple, satisfying meal. And down by Willow Creek, where the shade was deep and cool, a few older boys were fishing, their lines trailing lazily in the slow-moving water, their conversation desultory, punctuated by long, comfortable silences, the only sounds the gentle gurgle of the creek over smooth stones, the rustle of leaves in the slight breeze that always seemed to find its way along the watercourse, and the occasional plop of a lure hitting the water, their hopes not so much for a prize-winning catch as for a few hours of peaceful escape, a connection with the quiet rhythms of nature that seemed to soothe the soul and untangle the knots of youthful anxieties. And the old mill, its water wheel long silent, its stone walls covered in ivy, stood as a picturesque ruin on the far bank, a reminder of an earlier iteration of Havenwood, a time when the creek's power was harnessed for industry, now reclaimed by nature, a beautiful, melancholic monument to the passage of time and the changing fortunes of small towns. And Mrs. Albright, whose honeysuckle perfumed the entire neighborhood, was on her porch swing, a tall glass of lemonade sweating beside her, a well-worn book of poetry open in her lap, though her gaze was mostly directed towards her garden, where butterflies flitted among the blooms, their wings like tiny stained glass windows, and the hummingbirds, those iridescent jewels of the air, zipped and hovered, their wings a blur sipping nectar from the trumpet vines, their energy a vibrant contrast to the sleepy afternoon stillness that enveloped much of the town. And she sighed, a contented sound, feeling the deep peace of a familiar routine, a well-loved place, the accumulation of countless such afternoons stretching back through the years, each one a pearl on a long, unbroken string of memory, and the town's single traffic light. At the intersection of Main and Elm, cycled through its colors, red, amber, green, with a patient, unhurried rhythm, often changing for no traffic at all. Its presence more a symbol of civic order than a pressing necessity in a town where yielding to pedestrians and exchanging a friendly wave were ingrained habits, and the faded paint on the crosswalk lines, trodden by generations of Havenwood feet, from tiny, tentative first steps to the slow, shuffling gait of the very old, told its own silent story of the town's journey through time, and the air conditioner in the window of the barber shop. Old Mr. Peterson's domain hummed and dripped, offering a cool, slightly medicinal-smelling haven for the men who gathered there not just for haircuts, but for conversation, for camaraderie, for the familiar ritual of a hot towel and a straight razor shave, a masculine sanctuary where stories were swapped, jokes were told, and the world's problems were debated and often, in their estimation, solved, all under the comforting snip, snip, snip of Mr. Peterson's shears, a sound as rhythmic and soothing as the ticking of the old regulator clock on his wall, its face adorned with an advertisement for a brand of hair tonic long since vanished from the shelves, and the scent of bay rum and talcum powder clung to the air, a nostalgic fragrance that seemed to belong to a kinder, gentler era. And the shadows were beginning to lengthen ever so slightly, a subtle indication that the afternoon was starting its slow slide towards evening, the sun beginning its descent from its zenith, though many hours of daylight still remained, long, golden hours that in Havenwood were savored, not rushed, and the ice cream truck, its tinny, slightly off-key music a siren song to children and adults alike, began its slow, meandering route through the residential streets. Its arrival heralded by the joyful shouts of youngsters who would appear as if by magic, coins clutched in sweaty palms, their faces alight with anticipation for a cold, sweet treat. A fudgesicle, a creamsicle, perhaps a bomb pop with its patriotic stripes, a simple pleasure that marked the high point of a summer afternoon for many. The driver, a cheerful college student home for the summer, knew all the regular customers by name, and often their favorite flavors too. Another small example of the personal connections that characterized life in this unpretentious, close-knit community, and the old dog, Buster, who belonged to the Miller family but was considered by many to be the town's communal pet, lay sprawled in a patch of shade on the sidewalk outside the hardware store, his tongue lolling, his tail thumping a slow, lazy beat on the warm concrete whenever a familiar voice greeted him, his presence a comforting, unchanging fixture in the daily landscape of Main Street, a furry, four-legged embodiment of Havenwood's easygoing nature. And the gentle hum of lawnmowers could be heard from various yards, a chorus of suburban endeavor, the scent of freshly cut grass, sharp and green, adding another layer to the complex olfactory tapestry of the afternoon, a smell that was intrinsically linked with summer evenings, with bare feet on cool lawns, with the satisfying sight of a neat, well-tended yard, a small patch of order and beauty carved out of the wider world. And as the day wore on, the heat began to lose some of its intensity, a subtle shift in the quality of the light, a softening around the edges, a signal that the transition towards evening was truly underway, bringing with it the promise of cooler air, of fireflies, of the quiet rituals of winding down, of families gathering on porches, of the slow, sweet unfurling of a Havenwood twilight, a time of particular magic, when the ordinary seemed to glow with an inner radiance, and the world seemed to hold its breath, just for a moment, before surrendering to the gentle embrace of the approaching night. The streetlights on Main Street flickered to life once more, their soft amber glow pushing back the encroaching shadows of dusk, mirroring the warm lights that began to appear in the windows of houses along Elm and Oak and Chestnut, squares of inviting yellow against the deepening blue of the evening sky, and the air, now noticeably cooler, carried the mingled scents of suppers cooking. Perhaps fried chicken from one house, spaghetti sauce from another, the sweet aroma of a pie baking in yet another, a fragrant tapestry that spoke of home, of family, of the comforting rituals that anchored the end of each day in Havenwood. And the screen doors, those ubiquitous portals of summer, continued their rhythmic creaking and slamming, accompanied by the murmur of conversations drifting from porches where families gathered to share the last moments of daylight. The older folks settled into their favorite rockers, the children perhaps chasing the first elusive fireflies that blinked into existence in the twilight, their tiny, cold sparks like scattered jewels in the deepening gloom. And Mr. Abernathy, having finished his supper, was back on his own porch, his pipe now lit, the fragrant smoke curling lazily into the still air, his gaze fixed on the western horizon where the last streaks of sunset painted the sky in hues of violet and rose. A silent, spectacular farewell to the day, a masterpiece renewed each evening, free for all to behold, and the baseball game, that timeless soundtrack of American summers, was likely playing on radios in kitchens and living rooms, the announcer's calm, familiar voice narrating the distant drama of innings and outs, a soothing, unobtrusive backdrop to the evening's domestic rhythms, a sound that connected Havenwood to countless other small towns across the land, all listening, all sharing in this simple, enduring pastime. And at the Starlight Diner, Flo was preparing for the modest evening crowd, mostly regulars who preferred her company and her cooking to their own, or the occasional trucker who'd wisely chosen the old highway over the impersonal interstate service plazas, seeking a taste of something real, something unhurried. And the neon star above her door cast its welcoming beacon into the growing darkness, a promise of warmth and sustenance, a familiar landmark in the nocturnal landscape of the town, its hum a quiet counterpoint to the chirping of the crickets, which had now begun their nightly serenade in earnest, their chorus rising and falling in a soothing, hypnotic rhythm, the quintessential sound of a summer night in the country. And the distant train, right on schedule, sent its mournful whistle drifting through the valley, a sound that was less a disruption and more a part of the evening's familiar soundscape, a reminder of the world beyond the hills, yet also a strangely comforting affirmation of Havenwood's peaceful remove, its sense of being a haven, just as its name suggested, from the clamor and rush of modern life. And young Timmy Carmichael, his firefly hunt temporarily abandoned, was being called in for his bath, his protests mild, his energy finally beginning to wane after a day packed with the small but significant adventures of childhood. His mother's voice, firm but gentle, a familiar anchor in his world, and Sheriff Brody, beginning his night shift, his patrol car freshly washed and gleaming under the streetlights, started his slow, deliberate cruise through the town. His presence a quiet reassurance, a watchful eye ensuring that the peace of Havenwood remained undisturbed, his route taking him past the darkened storefronts, the quiet residential streets, the sleeping park, each familiar landmark a testament to the town's enduring stability, and the old town clock in the church steeple, its face softly illuminated, prepared to chime the hour, its deep, resonant tones rolling out over the rooftops. measuring the slow, steady passage of time in a place where time itself often seemed to hold its breath, to linger, to allow for the savoring of moments and the scent of night-blooming jasmine. Perhaps from a hidden trellis in someone's secluded backyard began to perfume the air, a sweet, almost intoxicating fragrance that added a touch of enchantment to the ordinary evening, and the stars, one by one, began to prick through the darkening velvet of the sky, distant, silent witnesses to the unfolding nightly drama of a small town settling into slumber. Their light, eons old, traveling unimaginable distances to sparkle for a fleeting moment above the quiet streets of Havenwood, and inside the houses, lamps were being extinguished, books set aside, last good nights whispered, the small, intimate rituals of bedtime playing out in countless variations, each one a gentle step towards the oblivion of sleep, towards the renewal that the night promised, and the rain, which had been hinted at by the earlier humidity and the distant rumble of thunder far to the west, began to fall, softly at first, a gentle patter on roofs and leaves, then gradually increasing to a steady, soothing shower, washing the dust from the streets, cooling the air, creating a cocoon of sound that enveloped the town, a natural lullaby that encouraged even the most restless souls to surrender to sleep. The streetlights reflected in the wet pavement, creating shimmering ribbons of light, transforming the familiar into something magical, dreamlike, and the world outside the windows became a soft-focus watercolor, blurred and indistinct, the sounds of the town muffled, hushed, all but the gentle drumming of the rain, a rhythm as old as time itself, a rhythm that spoke of cleansing, of release, of the deep, restorative power of nature and Havenwood, under its blanket of soft rain and deepening night, sighed contentedly, its collective consciousness drifting towards dreams, dreams of sunny afternoons, of laughter, of simple pleasures, of the enduring, quiet strength that resided in its familiar streets, its steadfast people, its gentle, unhurried way of life, a way of life that, like the steady rain, nourished the roots of the community, ensuring its quiet persistence, its timeless charm, a charm that lay not in grand pronouncements or dramatic events, but in the endless, comforting repetition of the ordinary, the sacred, the beautifully mundane, a cycle of days and nights, seasons and years, unfolding with a grace and dignity that was the true heart of Havenwood, a heart that beat in slow, steady rhythm with the ancient pulse of the land itself, a peaceful, enduring cadence that promised rest, and then with the dawn, a quiet, hopeful renewal.